Turn up the volume. We're talking about volume-heavy offenses, maybe those that aren't going to run a lot of plays on the other end of the spectrum here, and what it means for fantasy. Welcome to the show on Wednesday, July 2nd. Hope you're getting ready for a very fun weekend. July 4th is on Friday. No show on Friday, but we'll be back. We have a show tomorrow, a mailbag tomorrow. Email us at fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. That is the letter I, fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. You can also leave an Apple Podcast question. I do have some of those to read as well. Leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. I am Adam Azer with Dave Richard and Heath Cummings. What a fun conversation we had before the show. Here's the gist of it. What was the best decade of your life? Was it, you can't, like, it's not going to be your first 10 years. Was it 10, was it 11 through 20, 21 through, or no, I guess it'd be 10 through 19, 20 through 29, your 30s, your 40s? What was the best decade of your life? Leave a comment. But Heath, give me the overall theme of today's show and why it matters.
Wait, I was getting ready to answer the best decade of my life.
Okay.
So the overall theme of today is looking at team volume, whether that is pass attempts, whether it's rush attempts, whether it is total touchdowns or total plays. There was an old, I think it might have been Joe Bryant that wrote it, but it might have been somebody else back at Football Guys more than a decade ago that had a theory of fantasy football that was just eliminate the suck.
Yeah.
Like, don't draft those
I'm out of
players
here again. See you guys.
on those teams that are going to score 31 touchdowns, like I might project one team this year to do, or the teams that are going to run 950 plays. Just draft high volume, good football team players.
I think it's a great idea. But the volume thing, I didn't really find a super strong correlation necessarily between high volume and high points.
I think that's more of a PPR discussion.
Yeah, just
volume creates a lot of PPR opportunities. I think what you'll look through, especially when you look at the teams that have run a lot of plays, is it's not always teams that score a lot of points. A lot of times it's teams that just go 5 yards at a time over and over and over and over again and don't have the big plays.
I wouldn't say that there was no correlation. I looked at the last 6 years, and I would say in 3 of the 6 years, there was a pretty strong correlation between teams that ran a lot of plays and teams that scored a lot of points. Last year being one of them, but ironically, the team that ran the most plays last year was the Cleveland Browns, and they scored the fewest points. But after that, it was Detroit. They were number 1 in points. Philadelphia, they were 6th. Dallas was 25th. Washington 5th. Tampa Bay 4th. So that's 4 of the top 6 teams in plays finished top 6 in scoring. So I would call that a pretty strong correlation. All right, so we'll get into that. And are the Ravens the most interesting team in terms of volume and what it means for fantasy? Are they up there at least?
They'd be up there.
Yeah, I think the Lions are probably more interesting because of the Ben Johnson discussion and how. I mean, maybe we should just start with this. Probably the most surprising thing I found from going through some research for this show. I've talked a lot about the step back that I'm afraid the Lions are going to take without Ben Johnson and Ragnow. I have them projected for the second most touchdowns in the NFL this year. I have them projected for 16 fewer touchdowns than they scored last year. They had 68. I don't project anybody for more than 53 this year. And so that just kind of shows that it's possible to say they're going to be worse without saying they're going to be bad.
Well, do you know how many they scored in 2023?
It was in the 50s.
And they still had the number 1-ish, top 3 tight end. St. Brown had a huge year, but they didn't have much from Jamison Williams that year, if I recall, right? St. Brown was wide receiver 3 overall. He was wide receiver 7 per. Oh no, sorry, I'm looking at last year. He was even better. He was wide receiver 3 overall in 2023 as well, and he was wide receiver 4 per game at almost 21 points per game. But yeah, Jamison Williams didn't contribute much that year. I think that was kind of the difference. And
I think Jahmyr Gibbs was 5 points per game worse.
Right. Gibbs. Yeah. Well, yeah. Montgomery.
Montgomery was even worse per game, I think. He was still top 15, but he was 14.8.
Yeah. All right. I mean, yeah, it's a pretty, it's an interesting theory you've got. You're the low guy on the Lions. It's gonna be a constant thing that we bring up, really, I think, throughout the course of the next couple of months as we get into draft talk. All right. So, Dave, you want to stay on that? You want to add anything to this?
No, I want to keep going, but as we move along, I've got my data portal open and would love to see if we can find some stats from last year to help support the projections that Heath gives, or maybe even, if not provide context, maybe a counterpoint.
Yeah, that would be, yes. And I told Dave this also, like going through this process is something in past off seasons I've done probably a little bit earlier, but I've been a little more dynasty focused this summer. And so I haven't as much. So I was just glad to go through this and see, like, are there some places in my projections where I can't justify what I've done?
Right.
Okay. So I want to talk about Darren Waller, actually, and just give a little bit of context and what he might be able to bring to the table for the Dolphins. He's actually, good article on CBSSports.com. He is the third star tight end in the last, I don't know, let's say 10 years to unretire. Can you name the other two?
Rob Gronkowski.
Yeah, Gronk. Yep. Who unretired. He retired at the age of 29, I believe. Darren Waller is going to be 33 in week 1. And the other who unretired, he retired at I think he retired after his age 34 or 5 season.
Jimmy Graham?
I hope I didn't miss Jimmy Graham. Jason Witten.
Jason Witten did come back.
Yes, I remember you liked him a lot more as an announcer than a tight end.
Yes, after one wildly successful season in the Monday Night Football booth, Jason Witten decided to come back for 2 more NFL seasons. All right, but let's stay on this topic. Why don't we just talk about volume here? And what else did you find, Heath, as you did this exercise with your projections and volume?
Yeah, I went through and gave you way more information, I think, than we're going to be able to use on this show. When you're talking about total plays, I think an interesting thing that Dave has some context on as well was, like, how many plays do I project for various offenses and why? And the 3 highest offenses I had in terms of projected total volume, in terms of total plays, were the Raiders, which might sound a little bit strange, but Chip Kelly's, in 4 seasons, his team, now they were all 16-game seasons, so you've got to use a 17-game pace, but at 1,136 offensive plays. Second is Cleveland. Kevin Stefanski, over the last 3 years, their offenses have averaged 1,140 offensive plays, and that's with some pretty bad quarterback play, even when Deshaun Watson was healthy. And then third, the Eagles have kind of been the gold standard, really, since Nick Sirianni got there, of being over 1,100 plays per game. And just to put that in context, the league median last year was 1,061. And so that's 4 more plays, 4 to 5 more plays per game than league median.
I love the Raiders aspect of this here. They were 12th, I think, in plays last year. So, yeah, go ahead.
I think at the very least, it helps to explain why I'm probably higher on Bowers and Genty than Dave and Jamie are, and why I'm less concerned with Chip Kelly maybe being more run heavy than they were last year, because 55% pass rate on 1,120 plays is a lot more, is just as appealing as 58% if you're only running 1,060.
Dave, any thoughts? And I would also add that Chip Kelly was a pretty successful coach in terms of just points per game. For the 4 seasons, I believe he was a coach. Anything to add, Dave? So he's saying that the Raiders, Browns, who are always up there in most plays, and Eagles, who are again always up there, will run the most plays. That's Heath's projection.
Well, as far as Chip Kelly goes, I think it's a little dangerous to assume that Chip's going to be the exact same type of play caller that he was in his first stint in the NFL. He got fired from 2 jobs doing what he was doing. He went back to college after that. I went and looked and saw what he did at UCLA. His pace was not fast at all. He was never higher than 22nd in the FBS in offensive snaps. He was as low as 78th. So that's not necessarily great. And his time of possession per play was always outside of the top 90. So I think he realized that he could still slow things down, maybe when he needed to. I mean, it's not like UCLA was a haven for offense, and even like the last 3 years that he was there, 21, 22, 23. But he did step it up in 2024 when he went to Ohio State. It was for just 1 year. He obviously had better talent around him, guys that knew what they were doing. Ohio State was 9th in the FBS in total plays last year with 988, 23rd in time of possession per play. So maybe he put his foot on the gas just a little bit more in that season. And they played a lot more than the typical FBS team because of the college football playoffs. I think that Chip Kelly has definitely modified his offense and also his philosophies as he went back to college. And he's probably going to apply a lot of that to the NFL. If he feels like the Raiders would benefit from a slower pace, I think you can expect him to do that. Whereas when he got to Philadelphia, it was, nope, we're doing it this way. All gas, no brakes. You're going to play a ton of snaps, and we're going to try and run the defense off the field on every single possession. I think he's learned to kind of harness that a little bit, and we just have to wait and see what type of team the Raiders have and how confident Chip Kelly is in Geno Smith running an up-tempo offense, or if Ashton Genty can handle getting 2 carries within the span of 25 seconds of game clock. I mean, these are the types of things that we just have to wait and see on. And so that's why I would be a little hesitant to assume that the Raiders are going to run more plays than anybody else in the National Football League, especially since some teams have basically gone unchanged, and they're going to be easy to predict. Philadelphia is a great example. I know that they just changed offensive coordinators, and Kellen Moore, he's known for running a ton of plays, so maybe that's going to happen in New Orleans. But as long as Sirianni's been there, Heath, you mentioned it, I think that's a team that's probably a safer bet. I think Detroit is fairly safer as well than Las Vegas running a ton of plays. But it does help the point that the Raiders were 12th in overall plays last year. They were tied for 12th. And that means that they probably have a shot to be top 10, maybe top 5. And that's pretty good.
Yeah. We should talk about teams that we don't expect to run a lot of plays, and we'll do that in a moment. First, I have a couple things I want to promote. The Draftathon season has begun. We have already had 2 purchases of mailbag questions. So we're going to do a mailbag next week, and we'll read 10 of your questions. $50 donation to St. Jude. You can, sorry, let me give you the URL before I keep going here. It's tinyurl.com/2025FFT. tinyurl.com/2025FFT. Go there and you'll see you can bid on mailbag questions, having your mailbag question answered on the air. So it's $50 for each question, and we will read it on the air.
May I give some trivia before the break?
Yes, but there's one other thing I wanted to promote real quick.
Okay, go ahead.
Monday afternoon, 1 p.m. Eastern, we are having a special show on CBS Sports Network. So we will see you there, 1 p.m. Eastern, Monday afternoon, CBS Sports Network, 1 hour of fantasy football today. Go ahead, Dave.
This team finished bottom 5 in plays, total offensive plays, and top 3 in offensive touchdowns. Name that team.
Buffalo.
You got it. I was going to say name that team after the break, but you guys beat me to it. And you answered correctly. I'm very proud of both of you.
Thank you. Yeah, we talked about that a lot. The Bills running with the second fewest plays or the third fewest plays last year?
5th fewest plays.
Oh, 5th fewest plays.
3rd most touchdowns, 5th fewest plays.
Oh, such an idiot. All right, we'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today.
Here we go. The 2025 CBS Sports NFL schedule is here. 18 glorious Sundays.
He's got his receiver touchdown.
Filled with rematches.
Oh, the play of the year.
And rivalries.
Touchdown, Bengals.
Plus, plenty of superstar showdowns. And an epic matchup between the Chiefs and Cowboys on Thanksgiving. Clear your Sundays beginning September 7th for the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus.
Got a good question in the chat from Popinski. Are Aaron Rodgers teams consistently at the bottom of this metric? We're talking about plays, run.
They are consistently, and I think that highlights one of many conflicts between the history of Arthur Smith and the history of Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers likes to throw the ball 10 times a game to his top wide receiver. Arthur Smith likes to throw to his wide receivers as little as possible. Aaron Rodgers would like to take the entire play clock on every single snap to see exactly what everyone in the stadium's doing before he chooses what he wants to do. Arthur Smith has been very the past 2 years above average in terms of pace and the number of plays he runs. So I have the Steelers projected pretty much league average in terms of total plays, because I really have no idea how those two are interact, but it will probably be entertaining if nothing else. The three teams I have for the lowest total plays are the Panthers, the Packers, and the Rams.
And what's behind those projections?
Mostly, I mean, for the Panthers, it's a combination of what happened last year and and the fact that I don't think they're a very good offense. The Packers and the Rams, I think Stafford's just a little bit slower, and LaFleur may be influenced by Rodgers at the beginning of his coaching career, but LaFleur's been a little slower as well, or lower play total at least.
Does it matter to you with the Packers and the Rams? They should be pretty damn good offenses.
I don't think it matters with the Rams as long as they stay as concentrated as they've been. It's always been almost all their targets go to two guys, and Kyron Williams handles all the rush attempts, and you don't have to worry about running a low number of plays. I think it matters with the Packers in terms of what we've talked about a bunch, and that is the fact that in the past, nobody's gotten a lot of targets.
Packers were tied for seventh fewest in total plays per game. They were fifth in rushes per game at 30.9. And a lot of that was obviously the running backs. It's not like Jordan Love used his legs a lot last year when he had that knee injury in week 1. I think they took that card out of his hand. But that does concern me a little bit for the receivers. That's a good example of slow-paced team that likes to run the ball a lot, especially, I mean, they succeeded running the ball out last year, so they just kept doing it. I would assume that they will be competitive when they run the ball. I don't know if they'll be quite as good, but they'll still be good. But that does make me a little bit nervous about the overall target volume opportunities for their wide receivers. And yes, they're tight end too.
And the Packers, well, that last year was lower than the 2 prior years in terms of plays run. But I said 1061 was the league median last year. They've not been above 1052 in the last 3 years.
Do you think that number was lower because of the games that Malik Willis started?
Well, he just said 3 years in a row.
3 years in a row, they've been below league median. So maybe
below league median isn't that big of a deal compared to being like bottom 5, bottom 10, and they're right in between those two areas. Were they lower last year than they were the year prior?
Yes.
Okay. So I wonder if that was, well, Malik Willis played a little bit the year before too. I don't know. Maybe I'm just making stuff up that doesn't make sense for this particular argument, but ultimately it does. This is an idea of the type of thing that does make me nervous about Packers wide receivers and thus Packers quarterback.
I mean, I remember they got super run heavy last year, but that doesn't necessarily mean fewer plays. The Jets, for example, ran the 3rd fewest plays in the NFL, and they were basically the most pass heavy team. They had the fewest running back. They had the fewest carries in the league. And
just to kind of show how I normalize this, like I didn't project Chip Kelly's offense to run as many plays or Kevin Stefanski's to run. They're such outliers over their last 3 years that I drew it back a little bit. Maybe to Dave's point, not far enough. A lot of people asking in the chat why the Panthers are so low.
Yeah,
they ran 993 offensive plays last year.
I think a lot of that had to do with their defense being terrible. Like their defense stomped in the second half of games. They lost time of possession in the second half frequently.
I'm giving them a lot. Somebody is definitely going to, I have them last at 1040. Somebody's definitely going to run fewer plays than that, but this is not predictive enough to where you don't want to normalize it some.
Yeah, defense is another thing that I don't know how big of an influence it has. The Jaguars and the Panthers ran the fewest plays in football last year. They did not have good defenses. The Jets were 3rd fewest. I mean, they didn't have a horrible defense or anything like that. They were bad. Chargers.
They had Rodgers.
Yeah. Chargers 4th fewest. Chargers had a good defense for most of the year. Bills 5th fewest. I have a feeling offensive tempo kind of matters more than defense.
The Bills are an example of something, and I guess the Chargers had a little bit of this with Quentin Johnston. But I remember there was a time, I think maybe Mahomes' best year or second best year, the Chiefs were kind of like the Bills last year. They scored a lot of points and didn't run a lot of plays, and that's because they scored from 50 or 60 yards away a lot of the time.
Sure, yeah.
Now they're the opposite, and they throw 600 passes that go 4 yards apiece.
To the point that I tried to make, the Panthers were 31st in the league in offensive plays. The Jaguars were 32nd. Those two teams were also first and second, respectively, in opponent plays per game. Panthers 67.9 opponent plays per game. Jaguars 66.2 opponent plays per game.
So Heath, let's wrap this segment up here. When it comes to Chuba Hubbard and Tetaroa McMillan, are you lower on them because of the projected play volume? You have Carolina with the third fewest plays. Sorry.
Yeah, probably Tet. Yeah, because I have him at a 21% target share, but that would be worth more if they were projected to run more plays. As it goes back to the grandma's apple pie discussion. And not probably quite as much as Chuba, because I'm not really worried about somebody cutting into his workload at running back unless he's injured. Like, I think if he stays healthy, he'll have a high enough percentage of the running back touches that he can overcome that.
I think Carolina will probably be closer to league average in offensive plays. Their defense definitely got better.
Yeah, I've got them
their offense is ascending. I don't mind saying that Carolina won't be toward the bottom of this list. And
I've got them running fifth. I've got them running 4 more plays per game than they did last year.
Yeah, there you go.
But still last.
Right.
Yeah. By the way, you said you're not worried about Chuba Hubbard splitting. Neither is Alex Zitlow. I apologize. Of the Charlotte Observer, he thinks Chuba's carries will decrease a bit, but he'll still see the overwhelming majority of the touches. That's one news item for you there. All right. One thing, Heath, that I note is that it's hard for wide receivers in full PPR and in half PPR to finish in the top 12 overall if their offense is bottom 5 in pass attempts. It has happened 6 times over the last 12 seasons where we've had a wide receiver finish top 12 overall in half or full PPR on an offense that's bottom 5 in pass attempts. Now, if you expand that to bottom 6 pass attempts, you actually get 9 wide receivers in the last 12 years. Bottom 5 in pass attempts, 6 wide receivers in the last 12 years have finished top 12. So that's especially relevant for Garrett Wilson, I think, for Zay Flowers. Your thoughts on this discussion here, what this means for wide receivers if their offense is not going to throw a lot, bottom 5 in pass attempts.
Well, I would assume I've only got the bottom 3 in my projections, but I would assume at least like 2 of the exceptions to that rule are the AJ Brown, whose Eagles once again project for the third fewest pass attempts. I've got the Ravens at 486, which shouldn't surprise anybody. The Jets at 499. That one I think you have to be a little bit less certain about because it is a new offensive system, and it's Justin Fields who has had a hard time putting 17 games together. And then the Eagles at 505, not surprising, but the other thing that's in common is all 3 of these quarterbacks may be in the top 5 in quarterback rush attempts.
AJ Brown is not one of them from what I see because he was not top 12 last year. And the other 2 years, I don't think the Eagles were bottom 5 in pass attempts, but I will double check.
This does show though why I'm lower on Garrett Wilson. And as I said yesterday, I'm not comfortable with it.
I've got AJ Brown as 13th in PPR points per game last year.
Not per game. This is total points though. And he was, because you have to do that when you're talking about overall pass volume here. He was wide receiver 19 overall last year because he only played 13 games. The year before that, Philadelphia was 21st in pass attempts, and the year before that, the problem
I'm saying with making it the total points discussion is, did he finish 19th
23rd
because he only played 13 games, or because the Eagles didn't throw the ball as much as the rest of the league?
Well, he finished 13th per game. It was they've gone from,
you said 19th in total points.
Yeah, 19. Okay, so listen. So the Eagles were 21st and 23rd in pass attempts per game, or 23rd and 21st. I did it out of order in AJ Brown's first 2 seasons with the team. Last year, I think they were last. If they weren't last, they were close to last. They were last in the NFL, and he had his worst season as an Eagle, right? So. Double check on
7 PPR points is still pretty good.
Yeah, it was, but pass volume mattered for him. It can't act like it didn't. So that was the first time that they were bottom 5. Again, it was pretty drastic going from basically 22nd in pass attempts per game in the first 2 years to 32nd. That's a big drop. Now, we have heard that they are going to be different this year. They're going to throw the ball more, basically. But I think this is worth noting. I mean, we saw this is proof right here that it did hurt A.J. Brown, that they did not throw nearly as much. Didn't hurt him that much, but he lost about 0.6 of a point per game and was not a top 12 wide receiver per game. So if he's going to live up to being a top 15, 16 overall pick, I do think they're going to have to throw more than they did last year. And I think they will. We talked about Garrett Wilson, but I think Zay Flowers is another guy, because I was just watching some Zay Flowers tape this morning.
He's good.
So good.
Yes.
But I don't know. I mean, could he be? He scored. They threw 41 touchdowns last year. He caught 4 of them. That's amazing. But I went and I looked, and like if you kept Zay Flowers catches and yards from last year, if somebody wants to, actually I have it right here. So it was 74 catches, 1,059 yards, 4 touchdowns. If you kept his catches and yards and gave him 8 touchdowns last year, and you gave him only 16 games instead of 17 games because he got hurt early in week 18, and you take Zay Flowers' points, you still don't have a top 20 wide receiver in any format.
Yep.
So I love Zay Flowers. He's Devontae Smith, right? Like, he's so good.
Right.
The pass volume is even worse usually for Baltimore than it is for Philadelphia. So, Dave, where you at on Zay Flowers? Like, I think like Jacob Gibbs loves him. We all love him as a talent, but where you at on Zay Flowers?
This is yet another example of a player who is super talented. There's no debating it, but he's just in a spot that stinks for fantasy football because he's on a team that usually doesn't throw the ball very much. And for whatever it's worth, they kept Mark Andrews, and they brought in DeAndre Hopkins, Rashad Bateman. They signed to an extension. There's a lot of people there who can catch the ball and really keep the lid on Zay Flowers getting to even like 7 touchdowns, much less more than that. I think what he did last year is a fair expectation, but I don't think anybody's drafting him with the hope that he becomes a top 12 fantasy wide receiver. I think if you're drafting him as a number 3 wide receiver because of the situation, not because of the talent. And if he finishes top 24, then that's kind of a bonus. But I wouldn't take him as one of the first 24 or maybe even top 30 wide receivers off the board.
I think that the thing with Flowers is probably like the conversation gets even more interesting in Dynasty because he's a 24-year-old wide receiver who we all agree is really, really good at football.
Yeah.
And so do you want to speculate that and hope that at some point in his career he ends up in a better situation than this one? And it's hard to say a better situation than this one because the Ravens are one of the best offenses in the NFL, but the way they run their offense is not conducive to elite wide receiver production.
He really just needs more red zone, green zone, end zone targets. He does not get targeted there. He had a 25.4% target share, which was, I want to say, 8th or 9th best among wide receivers. But it only translated to 117 targets.
Right.
But when they get near the end zone, that target share just plummets. So again, 4 touchdowns out of 41 for the team is crazy low. You got to figure that'll improve.
Well, no, that's the big risk.
Percentage will improve, but the touchdowns will come down. They're not going to throw 41 touchdowns again. Yeah.
It might come down 10.
Yeah, exactly. He's wide receiver 31 in the OnlyFans ADP right now. On CBS. Here are some guys going ahead of Zay Flowers. Would you take them ahead of Zay Flowers? Devontae Smith.
Yes.
Teteroa McMillan.
As of now, no, but once we see McMillan clearly the lead guy in Carolina, I would say yes.
I'll say Zay over Tet.
Cortland Sutton.
Easily.
Sutton for sure.
Jamison Williams.
Yeah, I'll take Williams.
I'll take Williams, but it's basically a coin flip.
And George Pickens.
I'll take Pickens.
I'll take Zay.
Oh, look at this, Heath. Look at that. Got a little credit for the joke. Thank you. Thank you, Bordick. If Zay Flowers is really wide receiver 31 in ADP, and on CBS he is right now, on Fantasy Pros, I think I saw him as wide receiver 29. I would love that. What I don't want is him to get closer to 24. So I do want to have some Zay Flowers on my team. He might be an injury away from having, a Mark Andrews injury or something like that, away from having a huge.
Mark Andrews didn't get any targets last year.
I think it's got to be a Derrick Henry injury. I think that's the guy who has to leave.
But even before they had Derrick Henry, There's only one season where Lamar Jackson's throwing more than 29-ish passes per game. They're still so run heavy.
Right. I don't know if they'll be as run heavy with Justice Hill and Keaton Mitchell at running back. Am I forgetting somebody who's in that backfield that's got some power to them?
They have a rookie they drafted last year. So he's a second-year player, not a rookie anymore.
Rasheen Ali.
Yes.
Yeah,
but
he's a small guy too. So they might just rotate 3 smaller guys, and that would absolutely mean more passing volume. I think it's Derrick Henry. I think he's the contingency guy. I don't want it to happen. And he's also the reason why almost nobody other than Mark Andrews gets red zone and end zone targets in Baltimore. Because when they're inside the 5, it's Derrick Henry a couple of times, and they score almost every time.
You want to hear a kind of a quirky stat on Lamar Jackson? I have some more Lamar Jackson. I was inspired yesterday to just dig into Lamar Jackson. In the last 6 seasons, that's the Lamar Jackson era, basically, not counting his rookie year, Baltimore has been 7th, 13th, 30th, 20th, 15th, and 7th in running back carries. The 2 years they were 7th in running back carries, right? The other years they were 13th or lower. The 2 years they were 7th in running back carries were 2019 and 2024. And those were the 2 years that Lamar Jackson averaged 30 fantasy points per game and threw 30. Both years they threw 41 touchdown passes. It's just kind of a weird, almost oxymoronic stat that the 2 years that they were the highest in running back carries per game were Jackson's best years. Okay, anyway. Am I wrong about that? I feel like they didn't throw 41 touchdowns in 2019. I know they did last year. I think it was 36.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
It was his 2 best touchdown rate seasons. And listen, I just finished up my bust column and got to put one of the best quarterbacks in football on it, in Lamar Jackson, because he's got around 2 ADP and he's the first quarterback being drafted. He's worth that and more if he scores 30 fantasy points per game. But as Dave indicated yesterday, that's not going to happen again, probably. So don't draft a quarterback that early, even Lamar Jackson.
Sorry, what the stat I had was he was on pace for 41 touchdowns both years because he threw 36 touchdowns in 15 games in 2019. All right, back to the show here. I think, is anything else you want to talk about in terms of pass volume?
No, I don't think so.
All right. So let's take a break one more time, and we'll wrap up the discussion on volume and talk about maybe a little strength of schedule, talk about Darren Waller, some more quirky Lamar Jackson stats, and we'll be right back after this.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
All right, Heath, I'm going to throw it to you. Anything else you want to discuss on this topic?
I think that the touchdowns are probably good because, like, if we're really talking about avoiding those teams that are not going to score a lot, and one of these will be controversial and one of these will be instructive. So the fewest touchdowns projected in my projections, the Saints are like, there's a lot of teams close to the Falcons and Titans at 35. The Saints are 4 touchdowns fewer than any other team. And I don't even feel bad about that. It's like, generally I don't like to project outliers like that, but it probably applies more to Alvin Kamara and anything other than full PPR, and Chris Olave, who's never scored more than 5 touchdowns in a season.
Who do you think scores more touchdowns? And these 2 wide receivers are very close in ADP. Zay Flowers or Chris Olave?
Zay Flowers.
Scores more touchdowns?
Mm-hmm.
I'll say Olave.
Can you justify taking Olave over Flowers?
Yes.
I don't have them very close, so no, I can't. I strongly prefer Flowers.
You're not asking me if I would do that. You're asking me if I could justify it.
Justify it, Dave.
Yeah, justify it. And before you do that, you have Flowers 31st and you have Olave 36th.
Right. So even I'm not going to buy into what I'm about to say. You're just asking me to justify it, but it's food for thought. Kellen Moore's offenses are typically high-paced. They're probably going to be playing from behind a lot. This is a team with a defense that I think is fading quite a bit. And they do have a good offensive line. I think Tyler Shuck is at least capable as a thrower, and Olave figures to lead this team of targets. I don't think they'll be quite as run heavy like ever. So there is an opportunity here for Olave, provided that he stays healthy, to see a solid dose of targets. Could be in the neighborhood of 7 per game, could have some weeks with double digits. And I still think he's a very talented player. It's just he's been saddled with mediocre quarterback play for the entirety of his career. That's going to continue here. But maybe some garbage points will help him get over the hump and certainly find the end zone more than what Zay Flowers, I almost said Zay Jones. He will score more touchdowns than Zay Jones, but I think he can outscore Zay Flowers as well based on volume and, just a lot of passing in an up-tempo, maybe by necessity up-tempo offense in New Orleans.
All right, let's talk about the Falcons being on this list of fewest touchdowns. You have the Saints with the fewest touchdowns at 31, and the Falcons and Titans 35 and a half touchdowns. So the controversial one was the Falcons.
Yeah, and I think like the common denominator you see between these three teams is they basically all are going to have first-year starters. We got a couple of games out of Michael Penix last year, but I've talked about this a lot. Young quarterbacks, rookie quarterbacks in particular, so often second-year quarterbacks as well, struggle with touchdown rate generally. The good ones move past that. Trevor Lawrence hasn't yet, but still could. But we're talking about 3.5% touchdown rates for quarterbacks, and that makes a huge difference in a projection. So maybe Bijan scores 15 or 20, and then this looks silly. But Penix, even when he looked good last year, didn't throw touchdown passes. Cam Ward's a rookie. Don't have high expectations for him in that regard. And whoever the Saints start, same thing. So this is really about, if you think Michael Penix is going to be better than the average first-year starter, maybe you think that year on the bench means you don't have to worry about it and he's going to be like Mahomes and just be great in year two, then you would want to go against this. But I'm pretty pessimistic about the total pass touchdowns for the Falcons this year.
And just for those of us that might be mathematically challenged, when you say a 3.5% touchdown rate, that basically means 3.5 touchdowns every 100 pass attempts, correct?
Right. If you want to use 500 pass attempts, which I probably have them for a few more than that, that's 17.5 passing touchdowns, which is awful.
Yeah.
Gosh,
I think
really
Penix
hard.
can be better than that, but not a lot better.
It's really hard to justify Bijan Robinson as the number one running back, which we all have, if we think the Falcons are going to score the second fewest touchdowns in the NFL.
Well, I mean, they didn't score a lot more than that last year, and Bijan just scored 40% of their touchdowns.
But he wasn't, he wasn't number one. He was 2 or 3 points worse than Gibbs and Barkley per game. So they were 20th in scoring, I think, last year. No, 17th in points per game, 17th in offensive points.
39 total offensive touchdowns. It's a pretty far cry from what the Lions did at number one, but it's much closer to league average.
Oh,
and remember,
man.
Just one more thing, Adam. Bijan got off to a slowish start to the season, and it wasn't really until week 6 when the Falcons said, we should probably just give this guy the ball a lot, and they did.
Yes.
Yeah, he had 20 or more touches in all but 2 games from week 6 on. He averaged almost 23 PPR points per game. That's the guy that's the guy we're hoping for when we take him 101 or 102.
And just to kind of put the touchdown rate into context, because I know Kirk Cousins wasn't very good last year. Kirk Cousins has a career 5.1% touchdown rate and had a 4% rate last year, which a 4% rate for a rookie would be very good, or at least above average.
I think Cousins was a little better than he gets credit for, because the first week of the season, he was horrible. Looked like he should retire. He started playing better. Now, 2 games against the Bucs helped, but he hurt his shoulder, and he played, I think, 3 games with an injured shoulder and was awful. And then he got pulled. But he mentioned that after the season that he was playing with the hurt shoulder. So I don't know how much of a difference that made. I think it made a big difference. Just in case he gets traded, keep it in mind. He might not be as washed up as we think. So there have only been 2 running backs in the last at least 10 years. I think 9 years who have finished as RB1 overall on an offense that was 13th, that was lower than 13th in scoring. And that was Saquon Barkley as a rookie in 2018 and Christian McCaffrey the year after in 2019. Their offenses finished 16th and 20th in scoring, respectively, and they both had at least 91 catches. So they are the only RB1s on below average offenses since 2016. It can be done. It can be done. All right. I think we wrap it up. We're good?
I'm good if you're good.
Dave, do you want to save strength of schedule for a different show? Or
That's fine with me.
All right, cool. Let me give you some news and notes, but also a couple of Lamar Jackson stats that I found very interesting. Lamar Jackson had a 50% touchdown rate in the red zone. So if you're over 30, that's insane. 50%. I went back and looked through the year 2000, and this was by far the highest red zone touchdown rate I've seen. Lamar Jackson, 50% of his red zone passes were touchdowns. And then I saw this stat this morning on ESPN. Last season, Jackson targeted players who averaged 4.26 yards of separation, the highest in the league. And I thought that was really interesting. You know, he's throwing to wide open receivers a lot. I think that their scheme in the last 2 years might just be really good because his 2 best yards per attempt seasons have been in the last 2 years. Now, I think Zay Flowers helps that with his yak ability. Rashad Bateman had a really good year last year. But the Ravens are just creating wide open receivers and super efficient in the red zone. I don't even know if there's any fantasy analysis here. I just thought it was really interesting to see what the Ravens did last year.
Related note, they're my projected for the most touchdowns in the NFL in my projections this year.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm curious how many of the touchdowns came on play action, because if you're looking like you're giving the ball to Derrick Henry, I'm pretty sure the defenses will key in on that. And then you pull it out of his belly and you drop back and look over the field. Yeah, there's going to be some spaces wide open for these guys to catch a ball and make a play after. I wish the receivers did more with it. Like it's a great stat, and obviously Lamar was amazing last year, but you know, where were the receivers that finished in the top 15? You know, it's just weird. And maybe that's just an example of why volume matters, because he did all these great things throwing the football. Just imagine if he had thrown it as much as, you know, Joe Burrow or anybody like that throws the ball 600 times a season.
And Thomas put up the most touchdowns here. Just a good time for anybody who wasn't here at the start. Lions. I'm not totally the low guy on the Lions because I'm the high guy on Jared Goff. I think he's QB 19 by ADP, QB 12 in my rankings. They're still projected. You're higher, so
I think I have 11.
If like 52 touchdowns is awesome and the second best in the NFL in terms of my projections, it's also 16 lost touchdowns from last year.
So by the way, Dave, I don't know how many of the touchdowns came on play action, but since Todd Monken became the offensive coordinator, Lamar Jackson has actually had a huge drop in his play action percentage. He's gone from a guy who's been about 28, 29% to 24% with Monken. Thought that was interesting because a lot of times people just think it's so simple. Just put men in motion more and just do more play action. Those are the things that just create so many more points. But it has not been the case for the Ravens the last 2 years. He also had the most yak per completion.
We had an interesting volume question in the chat.
Oh, hit it.
Who can bench press more, Adam, Heath, or Dave? And Johnny was quick with the answer. Dave, easy. Didn't you see the commercial?
Yeah. And by the way, did I not share my bench press philosophy with everybody? When I bench press, that was
really the main point of me bringing that up, is I wanted to know, when was the last time that you did bench press?
High school. No, a few times in my early 20s. But Heath, my bench press philosophy is a simple quote that I try to live my life by. Raise the bar. That's it. You know, just always trying to raise the bar. That's all. Just get better and better every day. No, I don't know what I would bench press. I don't know. The bar is what, 45 pounds?
I think you could do that.
I could do that. I don't know if I could double that.
I bet you could put some 10s on there.
I hope so. I would say Heath could bench press more than Dave.
I would guess Dave. I don't know. Wait, Dave, when was the last time you did bench press?
I always try and do a max out bench press on my birthday. And I think last year my max out was, this is embarrassing, but 165. I did 1 rep of 165. It's way down from where I was when I was in high school, obviously.
Yeah.
So hopefully I can do that again this year. Ask me in 22 days.
I would guess if we did like a 145 as many times as you can, I would win that one. Just because I do bench press semi-regularly with my 15-year-old, but he's a 15-year-old, so he's not bench pressing a lot of weight.
Okay.
Right. 15 play action touchdowns last year for Lamar Jackson, so less than half of his touchdowns. 3 of the 4 touchdowns that Zay Flowers had last year came on play action.
Oh man, he's so good. Okay. Some news and notes, really not much, but the Dolphins getting Darren Waller for a 2027 conditional 7th round pick from the Giants. And the Dolphins gave up a 6th round pick in 2026. So Darren Waller, I mean, can he not do what Jonnu Smith did last year? I guess that's my question. Smith had a terrific finish to the season, but I don't think he can do that. But can he just do the overall numbers of Jonnu Smith, which I would say they were fairly attainable? Heath, what do you think? You didn't seem, when the news first broke, you didn't seem too into this idea of Darren Waller having much of an impact for the Dolphins.
I think that you might be minimizing what Jonnu Smith did last year.
Just the raw 888 catches, 884 yards. Now the 8 touchdowns, I would say no chance basically, but 88 catches, 884 yards in 17 games on 111 targets. That's 52 yards per game. You think Darren
I think the touchdowns seem the most possible.
Oh.
Like maybe he just happens to fall into the end zone 8 times. I am moving more and more towards the Dolphins are going back to their old tight end philosophy, which is mostly ignore them.
The other thing that Jonnu Smith did last year is be an extremely low ADOT guy, 4.9 yard ADOT. Dave, you talk about this all the time. I want to say, I give this stat last month or whatever, but something, he had the most receptions behind the line of scrimmage by a tight end in a really long time. I feel like anyone could do that basically, but yeah. What do you think about 50 yards per game for Darren Waller? Do you think that is attainable?
I don't think the Dolphins want that to be attainable. I think this is to Heath's point that he just made. I think the Dolphins are trying to get away from that and use their explosive playmakers a little bit more. And if circumstances arise where they don't feel as comfortable throwing to their wide receivers and and Devon Achane a lot more, then yeah, they can always fall back on, let's just throw little dink and dink passes to our tight end and have him make a play after the catch. I'd feel a lot better about it if it was Jonnu, because Darren Waller is going to be 33 years old soon after the season. Didn't play last year, hasn't averaged double-digit PPR points per game since 2021, and has all kinds of injury concerns. So he might take a couple of screens. He'll get clobbered a couple of times, and who knows if he'll be as into it as he once was, and if he'll even be healthy enough. I'm not going to fault anybody for taking him with a late-round pick, but I don't think it's going to be me. I think I can find other tight ends and other players in general I'd rather have late.
I'm just about ready to put Achane ahead of Bijan, honestly. But like Darren Waller's last 21 games, which stretches all the way back to the beginning of the 2022 season, he has not scored as many fantasy points as Jonnu Smith scored last year.
Yeah. He's always hurt. He's just like always hurt. He was on the really bad teams. I mean, that Giants team, he stunk. They stunk. So he'll be 33 through his age 32 season, though. Darren Waller has run 2,201 routes. Travis Kelce, through his age 32 season, ran 4,723 routes. This is including playoffs for both of them. So he's run half the amount of routes that Travis Kelce did through their age 32 seasons. I just bring that up because of, he's going to be 33, which is kind of old. He's 13 months older than George Kittle. We have no issues with Kittle. He's got very little tread on the tires. His career has obviously been...
Part of the reason is because he's always hurt.
Yeah, but the other part of the reason is, 1, he retired and missed a year. 2, he was suspended for more than one season, for like one full season and I think 4 games. He dealt with substance abuse problems when he was younger. So he really hasn't been on the field that much for a guy who's 33 years old. I'm just trying to make the case here for Darren Waller. I don't know that age is the biggest issue here as well. He's a young 33 in my eyes anyway, because he doesn't have a lot of wear and tear. But we haven't seen him be.
It's an interesting thought about, are you younger if you've played a lot more football but stayed healthier, or are you younger if you've suffered a bunch of injuries?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
I feel like you're younger if you got a late start to your career and your odometer is low.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me make one last point. This is where I was going. All right. So let's compare what Jonnu Smith did in 17 games with the Dolphins last year to the 17-game pace for Darren Waller with the Giants in 2023.
No, this will be interesting.
And I removed one game where he played like 12% of the snaps. Okay. For Jonnu, it was 111 targets. For Waller, it was 111 targets. For Jonnu, it was 88 catches. For Waller, 79. For Jonnu, 884 yards. For Waller, 847. For Jonnu, 8 touchdowns. For Waller, 2 touchdowns. So that's what I was saying. I don't know why he can't do that if they choose to throw the ball to the tight end.
Been another, yeah. I think you're taking he's a young 32 a little bit too far.
But is 33 old? If he's a great tight end, which he was, is 33 even old? It wasn't old for Kelsey. It wasn't old for Tony Gonzalez. There's not a lot of tight ends that get to this age.
Those are great ones, though. I don't think Waller qualifies as being even close to that universe.
He doesn't. It's hard to see him staying healthy.
It's hard to see him staying healthy. There's no guarantee he's going to have the type of volume that Jonnu had last year. Jonnu almost had that volume out of necessity because of the hand the Dolphins were dealt. Yeah.
Did you add Waller and baked burger at him?
Oh, I forgot about that. No, I don't think anyone did.
Like in a dynasty, in any of these leagues that are tight end premium, of course it makes sense. It makes sense even in a non-tight end premium league to take the shot on Waller. Just don't.
I wanted to, but I have Trey McBride and Isaiah Likely, and I wouldn't drop Zach Ertz for Darren Waller. I'm not dropping what?
Might.
No, I wouldn't either. No,
I might.
I am going to drop.
You have a lot of bad players. You can easily do it.
Should I drop Khalil Herbert for him?
Yes, I would be okay with that.
I don't know. I mean, there's really no point. I'm not going to.
Can you give us like your top 5 potential drops? Because I think it'll be a fantastic way to end the show.
Yeah, sure. I'm not going to drop Mike Gesicki or Gunnar Helm for him. So that would leave us with Damian Martinez, Jalen Coker, Khalil Herbert, Sean Tucker, Marshawn Lloyd, Deshaun Watson.
Oh, well, there you go.
These guys are all like, and I want to tell people the Baked Burger League is a kind of deep league, but it's not one of those deep dynasty leagues where all of these guys should be rostered.
Coker was dropped for Waller in my Sportsline Dynasty League.
I'm going to drop Khalil Herbert.
There you go.
Is he even on a team? Oh, he's on the Colts.
Yeah.
No, I don't think I want to drop him. I'm fine. My starting tight end's Jake Ferguson. We're good. All right. Actually, it's Elijah Arroyo. We're good. All right, we'll talk to you tomorrow with a mailbag on fantasy football today. Thanks so much for watching and listening. See you then.